A billionaire sees a rich heiress insulting a waitress for a pendant, and everything changes. "Take the money, you pathetic little waitress!" Claudia Warren's voice cut through the hush of the Gilded Finch like a knife, crisp and cold. Her manicured fingers tapped the linen tablecloth with impatience as she glared at the young woman across from her. The silver pendant around Eliza Monroe's neck trembled slightly as she clutched it with both hands. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I can't. It was my mother's." Claudia rolled her eyes. "It's not even real silver. You're clinging to trash. $5,000 is more than fair." From across the dining room, a man in a tailored navy suit lowered his wine glass. His expression shifted, first casual curiosity, then subtle focus. Elliot Vance rarely concerned himself with conflict outside boardrooms, but something about the girl's voice, and that pendant, pulled at a memory he couldn't place. Eliza stood still, forcing back the tears rising in her throat. She was 24, her apron still dusted with flour from the kitchen's chaos. The pendant, a small heart-shaped locket with delicate vine work etched into the metal, was old, worn, and priceless to her. It was the last thing her mother had given her. "She told me to keep it close," Eliza said quietly. "That it held our family's heart." Back then, Eliza hadn't understood what her mother meant. Now she did. Her mother, Annalise, had died in a car accident when Eliza was just 12. Her father, Henry Monroe, had tried to hold their family together, but grief and debt crushed him. He'd run Monroe Freight, once one of Chicago's most reliable mid-sized logistics firms, but after the crash, everything spiraled. The company folded. Their home in Evanston was foreclosed. He passed away of a heart attack 2 years later, the weight of failure too much to bear. Eliza was 18. And Lena, her 10-year-old sister, was suddenly her responsibility. She dropped out of her marketing degree and took whatever jobs she could get. Now she worked 6 days a week at the Gilded Finch, a fine dining haunt for Chicago's elite. The kind of place where no one noticed the staff unless they forgot the spoon. Claudia Warren noticed everything. Tonight, she'd seen Eliza's necklace. She'd made her offer mid-meal. $5,000 for that pendant. Take it or lose your job. It's not for sale, Eliza had whispered. That's when the insults began. You think that little trinket is worth something because your mother gave it to you? Let me be clear. You're worth nothing. That's why you're here serving me. Elliot Vance stood before he knew why. He crossed the floor with calm, deliberate steps, the room falling silent as the CEO of Vance Industries approached Claudia's table. His face, familiar from headlines and tech magazines, was unreadable. Claudia, he said. Sit down before you embarrass yourself any further. She blinked. Elliot. This doesn't concern you. It does now. He turned to Eliza. Are you all right? Yes, she said softly. Thank you, sir. You don't threaten people for what you want, Elliot said, voice colder now. That's not power. That's cruelty. He took out his phone. I'm calling the police. Harassment is still a crime, even for someone with the Warren name. You wouldn't dare, Claudia started. I would, he said. Within minutes, 2 officers arrived. Claudia's protestations echoed into the night as she was escorted out, clutching her designer bag like armor. Elliot turned back to Eliza, who still hadn't moved. I'm sorry you had to go through that, he said gently. What's your name? Eliza Monroe. He paused. Monroe, from Monroe Freight? She blinked. You knew my father? He saved my first company. When no one else would ship our prototypes, he stepped in. Didn't charge me a cent until we made our first sale. Eliza's breath caught. I didn't know. I never forgot, Elliot said. Then, why are you working here? She hesitated. Because my sister's 12. She's all I have. I couldn't finish school. And the jobs I want don't hire without degrees. He nodded, then opened his wallet and placed a check on the table. It read $50,000. I want you to work for me, he said. At Vance Industries. We have a role in communications that's open. It's yours if you want it. Salary starts at 80, benefits included. Eliza stared at the check, then at him. Why would you do this for me? Because your father was a good man, Elliot said. And because you didn't let someone like Claudia Warren take what mattered to you. That tells me everything. Tears blurred her vision, but this time, they weren't from shame. Yes, she whispered. Then welcome aboard, he said. Eliza Monroe's first day at Vance Industries felt like stepping through a door into a world she hadn't dared imagine belonged to her. The headquarters, perched on the riverfront in Chicago's West Loop, was a gleaming monolith of glass and steel. Inside, everything was light, silence, and purpose. Polished floors, quiet conversations over cappuccinos, abstract art on concrete walls. She wore her best blouse and a skirt she'd borrowed from a neighbor. Still, she felt every inch the outsider. But no one looked at her like she didn't belong. Her manager, Amira Patel, introduced herself with a firm handshake and a quick tour. We move fast, but not without grace, she said. You'll find your rhythm. I did. Eliza's role was entry-level, junior associate in the communications division, but the difference between this and waitressing at the Gilded Finch was staggering. She had a desk. A team. A badge with her name engraved in silver. By noon, she'd read through the campaign briefs and realized she understood more than she expected. All those half-finished marketing classes came flooding back. Her instincts clicked into place. Amira watched her with an arched brow. You sure you haven't done this before? I've studied, Eliza said. Just never had the chance to finish. Maybe now you will. Back at home that night, Lena was waiting on the couch, surrounded by schoolbooks and a microwave pizza. You looked like someone important when you walked in, she said, mouth full. Like someone who wears earrings on purpose. Eliza laughed and sank onto the couch. It was surreal. Did you use the money? Eliza paused. Most of the $50,000 Elliot had given her was still untouched. She'd paid off 2 overdue utility bills. Bought new shoes for Lena. The rest she'd put into a savings account she labeled someday. No, she said. Not yet. Maybe soon. She didn't mention the way people at the office had looked at her pendant, the way Elliot had stopped by her desk just to ask how Lena was doing. He checks in like he cares, she said once, offhandedly, to her reflection in the bathroom mirror. And that unsettled her more than she expected. But the past, as always, found its way back. Claudia Warren had been issued a warning after the incident at the restaurant. No charges were filed, her lawyers ensured that. But her pride had taken a hit, and her obsession with Eliza deepened into something sharper. She began digging. Her network of old guard real estate brokers, former socialites, and image consultants still owed her favors. With a few calls, she had access to Vance Industries' corporate chatter. One day, she sat at her penthouse bar and skimmed a file labeled Employee Monroe Eliza. When she saw the connection, Monroe Freight, Vance Industries, Elliot Vance's first product line, her lips curled into something that resembled amusement. Well, she said aloud, swirling ice in her glass. Now that's interesting. Eliza thrived. 3 weeks in, she pitched a campaign idea to Amira, a clean energy initiative with messaging aimed at inner-city high schools. Amira raised an eyebrow, then shared it with the director. The feedback. Let her run with it. This has voice. For the first time in years, Eliza felt not just useful, but seen. Lena noticed too. You stand different now, she said. Like people can't push you over anymore. Then, during a late evening at the office, Eliza found a file misfiled in the archives, one labeled Monroe Freight, 2008. Curiosity got the better of her. She flipped it open and read the contents. There it was. A record of the acquisition. Vance Industries taking over Monroe Freight's largest client. An internal note from a former executive. This will finish them. We move now. Her hands trembled as she held the paper. The next morning, she walked into Elliot's office without knocking. He stood when he saw her expression. You knew, she said. You knew what that deal did to my father. I didn't then, he replied. Not until it was too late. She dropped the paper onto his desk. You built your empire on the bones of my family. It wasn't intentional, he said. Your father and he helped me. I didn't know he was struggling. I swear. She believed him. Almost. I need time, she said. I won't quit. But I won't pretend this didn't happen. Elliot nodded once. That's fair. Back home, Lena asked. You okay? Eliza nodded. I found out something. About Dad. About the company. Lena watched her carefully. Did it change how you see Mr. Vance? Eliza didn't answer. Because she didn't know. All she knew was this: she was standing now where her father had once stood, on a ledge, looking at the future, not sure if it would hold. And she was still holding that pendant. Not because it was magic, but because it reminded her to keep going. 2 weeks passed. Eliza showed up each day, earlier than her team, sharper with every memo, more focused with every meeting. If anyone at Vance Industries suspected there was a fracture behind her professional calm, no one said a word. But Elliot noticed. He watched her during campaign reviews, her spine straighter, her tone clipped. She no longer lingered after calls. When their paths crossed in the hall, she nodded politely but didn't meet his eyes. He didn't push. Guilt, he knew, was a poor architect. It built nothing that lasted. Then came the article. Posted on a whispery gossip blog that lived to whisper louder, the headline read, From server to CEO's favorite, is Eliza Monroe the real power at Vance? It featured an old photograph of Eliza at the Gilded Finch, hair pinned back, tray in hand. A more recent one, grainy and zoomed in, showed her beside Elliot at a fundraising gala. There was no scandal in the text, just insinuation. That she'd been rescued. That she'd benefited. That this was less merit and more manipulation. Eliza found the link at midnight. She didn't sleep. By morning, her phone buzzed with texts from friends, colleagues, even a cautious message from Amira. Ignore it. You don't owe anyone your silence. But the board had seen it. She felt their eyes in the elevator. That afternoon, she walked into a meeting and opened her laptop with steady hands. Her campaign draft was airtight. No room for pity. No trace of favor. Elliot sat across from her. When it ended, and the room began to clear, he said softly, This story doesn't define you. But it defines how they look at me. Eliza replied. I can fix it. No, she said, her voice firm. I will. That night, Eliza wrote a statement. Simple. Direct. No spin. I came to Vance Industries with no advantages. I came with a work ethic I learned from waiting tables, from raising a child when I was still a child myself, from watching my parents lose everything with dignity. I earned my place. I still do. She posted it quietly. No hashtags. No tagging. It went viral within hours. By morning, local news stations were running her quote alongside stories about workplace integrity. Colleagues came by her desk, one by one, to say, Good work, or you said what needed saying. Even Elliot. You didn't need my help, he said. No, she replied. But I needed you not to stand in the way. And you didn't. But Claudia Warren wasn't finished. She had more than blog access. She had documentation, copies of old contracts, internal memos. Enough to thread a narrative that Elliot Vance had knowingly undercut Henry Monroe's final client, delivering the fatal blow. She walked into Vance Industries that Friday. Unannounced. The receptionist barely had time to react before Claudia swept through to the executive floor, folder in hand, heels echoing on polished marble. She entered the boardroom without knocking. Gentlemen, she said, I believe your golden girl and your golden boy have a problem. The folder dropped onto the table. Its contents fanned open, memos, emails, contracts. The board members stiffened. Elliot stood, face unreadable. Eliza, seated at the far end, didn't speak. Claudia's voice was syrupy. Looks like your outreach star is the face of a cover-up. Or, at the very least, the product of one. Eliza met Elliot's eyes. She saw it then, not guilt, but a kind of old pain. She turned to Claudia. You came all this way to throw this at my feet. Why? Because people like you don't get to skip the line. No, Eliza said. We build new lines. She gathered the papers without flinching, stacked them, then stood. Everyone deserves the truth, she said. I'll review everything in this file. And if there's something that needs addressing, I'll be the one to address it. And if there isn't? One of the board members asked quietly. Then I expect an apology, she said. From every person who whispered. As Claudia left, her silence was louder than her entrance. That night, Elliot knocked on Eliza's office door. She was still there. I should have told you, he said. Not just about the acquisition, but about how much your father's help mattered. I figured that out already, she replied. But what I need to know now is, are you ready to let his name be part of your story? Elliot hesitated. Yes. Then we start there, she said. She pulled out a folder. I want to propose a legacy scholarship. For the children of failed businesses. Let them have a future, even if their parents didn't. Elliot's throat tightened. Call it the Monroe Grant, Eliza added. If you mean it. He nodded. I do. And just like that, something shifted. The past didn't vanish. But it finally had a place to rest. Eliza didn't expect to see her name on the office walls, but when the internal newsletter launched the Monroe Grant Initiative, she paused mid-step in the corridor. The headline read, Legacy Meets Vision, New Fund to Empower Entrepreneurs' Children. The photo beneath it was modest, just a snapshot from the gala, cropped around her face. Still, it left her stunned. It was no longer a whisper. Her family's name, her father's name, was on the record, tied not to collapse, but to a future. Elliot never brought it up directly, but when they passed in the hallway, he gave her a nod. Not one of authority, but of recognition. She nodded back. The tension between them remained, but now it lived in a different register. Not resentment, but something heavier, older. A quiet grief either of them had fully named. And then Lena fell sick again. It began with exhaustion. Then fever. A shallow cough. The doctor said it was early pneumonia again, and ordered rest, fluids, and round-the-clock supervision. Eliza stayed home. She worked remotely from their tiny kitchen, wrote memos between medication schedules, submitted campaign notes in the middle of the night. When Lena's breathing turned shallow for a second time in 2 days, Eliza didn't wait. She bundled her in a coat and hailed a cab to the nearest emergency room. At the hospital, the numbers weren't dire, but they were enough. Lena would be admitted overnight. Maybe longer. And just like that, Eliza was back in a space she'd fought to leave behind. Watching monitors beep. Listening to machines do the work a child's lungs couldn't manage. She slept upright in a plastic chair, the pendant clenched in her fist like a prayer. The next morning, Elliot appeared. No warning. No text. Just a quiet knock on the hospital room door and his familiar silhouette filling the frame. I heard, he said. Is she all right? Eliza blinked at him, exhausted. She's stable. He nodded. Then held out an envelope. I didn't know if you'd accept it. But I couldn't not offer. She didn't take it immediately. Inside was a check. $100,000. I said no guilt money, she reminded him. It's not guilt, he said. It's gratitude. And respect. I don't want to owe you. You don't. But I owe your father. And I want to make that right. She looked down at the envelope. Then at her sister, sleeping softly under a white sheet. Eliza took it, quietly. Thank you, she said, voice cracking. The bills were covered by the end of the week. Lena improved. Her oxygen levels stabilized. She was discharged with new prescriptions and a warning to rest for at least 2 more weeks. They came home to a warm apartment, a fridge full of donated groceries from colleagues, and a small note on the door from Amira. The team's got your back. We see you. For the first time in months, Eliza let herself cry. Not from fear. From relief. A month passed. Then another. Claudia Warren, though silent, had not disappeared. She was still weaving her counter-narrative, one where she was the victim, where Eliza had manipulated her way into power, where Elliot had fallen prey to a pretty face and a sob story. And she found someone willing to listen. A tabloid editor with a personal grudge against Vance Industries. When the article dropped, it was nuclear. Billionaire's protégé, the secret collapse behind Eliza Monroe's rise. It included the original acquisition papers. Pushed a narrative that Eliza had used her father's downfall to bargain her way into a new life. There were no direct lies. Just manipulations. Half-truths framed like proof. Eliza read it twice. Then closed her laptop. She didn't speak to anyone for hours. By the time she arrived at the office the next day, people were staring. Not cruelly. Just cautiously. Like they didn't know where to stand. Amira found her in the stairwell. Say something, she urged. To the team. To the press. Don't let this control your narrative. Eliza shook her head. I'm not going to fight it. What then? I'm going to outlast it. She walked back into the office, lifted her chin, and began planning the launch of the Southside Community Program. Quietly. Steadily. She knew how this story started. But she still got to decide how it ended. The wind along Wabash Avenue had teeth. Eliza crossed the street with her coat pulled tight, her boots worn but dry. At the edge of Bronzeville, a newly painted mural covered the brick wall of what would soon become the Second Monroe Initiative site. Bright blues and oranges, children with outstretched arms, roots curling into concrete. She paused there, keys to the building in hand, feeling the same ache in her chest she always did when beginnings were too quiet to seem real. Inside, the room smelled of plaster and new paint. The old community center had been gutted and reborn, made warm by simple furniture and sunlight, not extravagance. She walked the length of the hallway alone, imagining the kids who'd walk here soon, laughing, struggling, asking questions she'd once asked herself. Where do we go when we have no one? Who helps when help doesn't come? The public firestorm faded slowly. The smear campaign had made its rounds, but with time and silence, the headlines moved on. Eliza never released a statement. She didn't sue. She didn't answer interview requests. Instead, she did what her mother had once whispered into her ear the night before a school recital. Outlast them. And let your work be louder than your defense. Internally, at Vance Industries, no one moved against her. If anything, her silence strengthened her image, someone who didn't scramble to preserve reputation because her truth was already intact. Even the board stopped asking questions. She was building something too visible to ignore. Back at home, Lena was thriving again. Recovered from her illness, she was back to arguing over algebra homework and rolling her eyes at hand-me-down sweaters. One evening, as they made dinner together, Lena asked casually, "Do you think I should write about Dad for my school project?" Eliza turned from the stove. "What kind of project?" "A personal history thing. Where we come from. Our name." Eliza hesitated. "You can. But you don't have to write about the hard parts." "But the hard parts are the most real," Lena said. He tried. "Even when everything fell apart." Eliza nodded slowly. "Then say that. Say he tried. And that you're still writing the next part." Later that night, Lena handed her a printed draft. The final sentence read, "My father didn't get to finish what he started, but maybe I will." Eliza pressed her hand to her mouth, eyes stinging. "It's perfect," she whispered. The Foundation's new center opened on a snowy afternoon, with a modest ribbon cutting and a group of neighborhood kids who couldn't stop asking where the basketball hoop would go. Elliot was there, quietly. Standing just beyond the cameras, dressed in gray, watching it all without stepping forward. He left before the speeches, leaving only a handwritten note for Eliza in her office. It's hers now. The future. Just as it should be. She didn't call him. But she kept the note. Then came the gala. It was meant to be a simple annual event, recognition for donors, staff, volunteers. But this year, the room buzzed louder than usual. The scandal had faded. Claudia Warren had disappeared from most circles, her grip on Chicago's social architecture pried loose by her own venom. Now, all eyes were on Eliza. She wore a midnight blue dress. The original pendant, polished and gleaming, rested just below her collarbone. Lena sat beside her at the front table, grinning as if they were about to win a Grammy. When Eliza took the stage, the room quieted. She spoke not of tragedy or triumph, but of structure. Every strong building begins with two things, foundation and failure, she said. We've had both. That's how we know what we're doing matters. She paused, looked across the room at the people who had once questioned her presence. Then toward the back, where Amira stood, arms crossed, beaming. And what we build next? Eliza continued. It won't have my name on the door. It'll have yours. Your kids. The people who come through here not knowing where else to go. They're not a problem to solve. They're a future to invite in. The applause was quiet at first. Then roaring. Backstage, Lena hugged her tight. You sounded like someone I'd vote for, she teased. Don't jinx it. Eliza laughed, but her voice caught. The war, it seemed, was over. And the world hadn't just forgiven her. It had started listening. Eliza returned to her office 2 days after the gala to find 3 bouquets on her desk and a handwritten envelope with no return address. The flowers were from donors. Predictable. Gratifying. The letter, though, was not. She recognized the handwriting immediately, angular, firm, unmistakably expensive in its restraint. Elliot. She opened it slowly, uncertain what she wanted from the contents. Inside was a single folded sheet of linen paper. There are things I should have said when we first met, and things I know better than to try saying now. But if I ever doubted whether helping you was the right decision, that doubt is long gone. I learned from your father once. I've learned more from you. Evie. There was no flourish. No plea for forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. That made it heavier somehow. Eliza set the letter aside, then opened her laptop. There was still work to do. In early spring, the Monroe Initiative received a nomination for the North Star Civic Impact Award. It came quietly through email, then exploded across social feeds after the nomination was announced publicly. Amira texted her the next day. You ready to be more than a headline? This is legacy. Legacy. The word curled in Eliza's mind. It didn't feel real until she sat on the auditorium stage weeks later, Lena beside her again, and heard the MC read her name as winner. She walked to the podium slowly, feeling the weight of every step. I used to think stories only changed when someone powerful rewrote them, she began. But I've learned that power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a mother raising 2 daughters alone. Sometimes it's a sister choosing school over sleep. Sometimes it's a waitress who says no when everyone tells her to say yes. She paused, breathing through the surge in her chest. We are not our worst day. We are not what others discard. We are builders. And this, she lifted the award slightly, isn't a finish line. It's just a very beautiful brick in the wall we're still building. The crowd rose to its feet. Some wiped tears. Lena beamed. And Elliot, standing near the exit in the shadows, placed a hand to his chest. Later that night, they walked home in near silence. Lena stopped halfway across the bridge on Kinsey Street. Do you think Dad would be proud? Eliza looked over the water, its surface catching fragments of the city lights. Yes, she said. But not just because of tonight. Because of every time we kept going. Lena reached into her bag, pulled out a notebook. She flipped it open to a page labeled Dream List. At the top, design a shelter that feels like home. I think I want to be an architect, she said. Eliza smiled. Then that's what you'll become. They walked the rest of the way home hand in hand, the chill fading, the city quiet around them. At Vance Industries, Elliot cleared out an old conference room and turned it into a library for staff, shelves of biographies, memoirs, and 24 copies of Foundations, a new book of essays written by recipients of the Monroe Grant. Eliza didn't write a chapter, but she wrote the foreword. We were not born into the same rooms, but now we build them, together. On a pale May morning, Eliza stood at the edge of a gravel lot on Chicago's South Side, staring at nothing and everything. The foundation hadn't been poured yet, but in her mind, the center was already built. She could see the layout: classrooms on the left, quiet zones for study and therapy on the right, a small greenhouse in the back. The third Monroe Initiative site wasn't just an expansion. It was the first center they would build from the ground up. No renovations. No compromises. Just vision, from soil to skyline. She turned to the architect, a slender woman with a ponytail and half-moon glasses named Mariah Kwong, and pointed to a scuffed patch of earth. I want the entrance to feel open, even if someone walks in scared. Mariah nodded. Glass. Wide steps. Natural light. We'll soften it with landscaping. Eliza glanced down at her shoes, still dusted in gravel. And it can't feel too polished. People shouldn't worry about tracking mud on the floors. I understand, Mariah said. It's for the ones who don't always feel welcome. That evening, Eliza returned home to find Lena curled up on the couch, surrounded by textbooks and a pile of graph paper covered in sketches. Geometry test? Eliza asked, dropping her keys on the counter. Kind of. Lena mumbled. I asked my teacher if I could do my final project in design form. Eliza raised an eyebrow. Lena held up a drawing, messy but detailed. It's a youth center. My version. Eliza took it carefully, her eyes scanning the page. It was rough but full of thought: ramps instead of stairs, a kitchen near the entrance, nooks labeled reading room and quiet zone. You even added an outdoor stage, she said. For open mic nights, Lena replied. Sometimes kids need space to say things out loud. Eliza swallowed a lump in her throat. You're not just going to build buildings, she said softly. You're going to build safe places. Lena shrugged. I learned from the best. Across town, Elliot stood at the edge of his own version of a blueprint. He was finalizing a transition, preparing to step down as CEO of Vance Industries within the year. Not for scandal, not for pressure. Just readiness. The company was stable, profitable, and respected. But more importantly, it no longer depended on his name alone. He watched the company's new leadership, people he'd mentored and tested, take the reins quietly, confidently. And in that stillness, he thought of Henry Monroe. He opened his drawer and took out the worn invoice that started it all, the shipment Monroe Freight had processed for his first prototype 15 years ago. Henry had once said, if you make it big, don't forget to hold the door open. Elliot folded the invoice gently and placed it in a glass frame. It would hang in the new Vance Foundation headquarters, beneath a plaque that read, in honor of those who showed up when no one else would. He hadn't forgotten. The summer moved quickly. Construction on the new Monroe site began in earnest. Volunteers poured in from every part of the city, retirees, students, single parents. Eliza worked alongside them in jeans and a baseball cap, hammering, painting, hauling crates. She refused to stay behind a desk. In the middle of July, she and Lena stood on what would be the center's second floor, the roof still open to sky, and stared out over the quiet neighborhood. I think it's my favorite one, Lena said. Why? Because we dreamed it before we built it. In August, something unexpected happened. A small publishing house reached out, interested in acquiring the rights to tell Eliza's story in a nonfiction memoir. She hesitated. Told them she wasn't ready. She wasn't done living the middle of it yet. But she agreed to write something smaller, an essay for a national magazine. It was titled, The Quiet Work. In it she wrote, I was never interested in being rescued. What I needed was room to stand up again. What I needed was someone to say, I believe you can do it without me. I became that person for myself. Then for my sister. Now I try to become it for others. That is the work. It's slow. It's often invisible. But it matters. The essay was published in late September. It went viral within hours. When the third center finally opened in early October, the ribbon was cut not by Eliza, but by Lena. Eliza stood beside her, hand on her shoulder, as the crowd cheered and children pushed past them, already exploring the new rooms. The walls were painted soft green. The floors, easy to clean. The furniture, practical and warm. In the hallway, a quote was painted above the door. "We don't fix people. We build places where people can begin again." Eliza ran her fingers over the lettering, then walked to the small office she would use only occasionally. She placed a photograph on the shelf, her father in front of the Monroe Freight Building, sleeves rolled, smile tired but true. Beside it, the pendant. Not in a case this time, but on a hook near the door. Still close to her heart. But no longer her armor. Just her origin. Autumn peeled back slowly across Chicago, the leaves crisping at the edges before falling, the wind taking on a sharper tone. In the mornings, the windows of the Monroe Initiative's new South Side Center fogged up from the breath of early visitors, kids coming for warmth, parents coming for advice, teenagers coming for space. Eliza watched it all unfold with a kind of quiet reverence. It had taken years. But what began with a pendant and a refusal to sell it had become something she could walk through, touch, name. She still worked long days, though differently now. Less putting out fires, more planting for spring. On Mondays, she ran team reviews. On Wednesdays, she visited the outreach programs that had spun off the original centers, portable tutoring pods, job readiness clinics, teen discussion circles in unused churches. And on Fridays, she taught a weekly session on communication for first-generation college applicants. She called it Voice and Ground. Lena teased her about the title, but Eliza didn't care. The room was always full. One particular Friday, a boy named Mason stayed after class. He was 17, tall, guarded. "You really used to be a waitress?" he asked, not rudely, more in disbelief. "Yeah," she said. "For 5 years." He scratched the side of his neck. "But you run a foundation now." "I didn't always." "It started small. Saying no to the wrong things. Saying yes to the scary ones." He nodded, then pulled something out of his backpack, a notebook, half torn, pages folded. "I've been writing," he said. "Poems. But I don't know how to, tell people that." Eliza held out her hand. He hesitated, then gave her the notebook. She read one. Then another. Then looked up at him. "You already told someone." Back at home, Lena was designing her own future. Her latest project was an after-school modular unit, small enough to fit in an alley lot, designed for maximum utility with minimal materials. It was for kids who didn't want to go home, or didn't have one to return to. "You're basically designing a second Monroe Initiative," Eliza said one night, looking over her sketches. Lena shrugged. "I'm just copying the best parts." Then she added, "Are you scared it'll get too big? That you'll lose control of it?" Eliza took her time answering. "I used to be," she said. "But now I think the goal is to be replaceable. Not because I want to leave, but because I want it to live without me." That December, Elliot Vance hosted his final board meeting as CEO. He wore his usual navy suit, but his face was lighter. There was nothing dramatic about his departure. No scandal. No whispered exits. Just a chapter closing. After the final vote of succession passed unanimously, he lingered behind while others filed out. Amira, now an executive partner, approached him with a soft smile. "She's made quite a name for herself," she said. "Because she earned it," Elliot replied. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded letter. "Give this to her, if she ever needs to know." Amira nodded, and took it without opening. New Year's Eve came with snow. Eliza stood on the rooftop of the original Monroe Initiative building, overlooking the stretch of city that had shaped her. The skyline blinked against the low fog. The hum of fireworks drifted up from Navy Pier. Lena stood beside her, wrapped in 2 scarves and an oversized coat. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "Miss what?" "Before. When it was just us, and the world was quiet?" Eliza didn't answer right away. Then, "Sometimes. But not the struggle. Just the closeness." Lena looked up. "We still have that." "I know," Eliza said. "And now we get to give it away." Below them, lights spilled from the windows of the center. Families inside. Laughter. Music. Hot chocolate. No one knew they were on the roof. No one needed to. That was the beauty of it now. It wasn't about being seen. It was about having built something that would remain even after no one remembered the building. Eliza held the pendant in her gloved hand for a moment, then let it rest beneath her collar again. Still hers. Still shining. But now, part of a constellation much larger. Spring arrived subtly. The snow melted before anyone could enjoy it, and in its place came puddles, bare branches, and the return of movement, people on porches, buses packed again, laughter returning to the streets. At the Monroe Initiative's headquarters, Eliza sat alone in her office one evening, reviewing a proposal for a mobile outreach unit. Her eyes burned from too much screen time, but she didn't stop. She rarely did. Then Amira knocked gently. "I have something for you," she said, stepping in. She held a letter. Cream-colored envelope, Eliza's name scrawled in a bold hand. "Elliot left this. Told me to give it to you when the time was right." Eliza held it for a long moment before unfolding it. Inside. "You were never a project. You were a mirror. You showed me what I'd forgotten. That empire without empathy is just ego in disguise. If I could rewrite the beginning, I'd ask for your forgiveness sooner. But since I can't, I offer this instead, my share of Monroe Freight's licensing royalties, returned to the family it came from." A single line was underlined at the end. "Your father would have fought for this. I'm just finally listening." Eliza read it twice. Then closed her eyes and exhaled, slow and long. This wasn't closure. It was continuation. That weekend, she and Lena visited the old warehouse where Monroe Freight had once operated. It had long since been converted, now an art space and lofts, but the exterior still bore faded signage. They stood in the parking lot, looking up. "He worked here every day?" Lena asked. "Every day," Eliza said. She pulled out her phone and took a photo, not for social media, not for a press release. Just for them. For memory. Lena slipped her hand into her sister's. "What do we do with this piece of history now?" "We build something new beside it," Eliza replied. "But we never pretend this didn't come first." They stood a moment longer, the wind soft around them. The past didn't own them. But it had shaped them, and now, it would shape others. The 5th anniversary of the Monroe Initiative arrived with no fireworks, no fanfare. Just a gathering in a repurposed gym on Chicago's west side, folding chairs, dim lights, paper programs. But the room was full. Former students, volunteers, parents, teachers. People who'd once come through the doors asking for help, and now returned to offer it. Eliza stood in the back at first, letting the evening unfold. Lena was up front, coordinating the program with 2 other teen leaders. She had grown tall, confident, her voice the kind people listened to even when she whispered. The first speaker was Mason, the quiet poet from her class years ago. Now 22, studying education, he spoke slowly but with certainty. "I came to the Monroe Initiative when I didn't know what I was capable of. I didn't leave with all the answers, but I left knowing I was allowed to ask better questions." Applause followed. And Eliza felt a wave of emotion she hadn't prepared for. She wasn't used to being still. Her strength had always come through movement, through doing. But here, among the lives touched by something she helped build, she finally understood the deeper truth. Her greatest act hadn't been the building itself. It was letting others carry it forward. After the speeches, Lena found her near the exit. "Someone wants to meet you," she said, nudging her gently toward the stage. Eliza followed her to a woman in her late 60s with sharp eyes and a kind smile. "I'm Margaret Warren," she said. "Claudia was my cousin." Eliza's breath caught. The name still carried weight, even if its bearer had long since faded from the city's conversations. "I didn't come to stir anything," Margaret said quickly. "Only to say, I watched what you did. All of it. And I think you turned something ugly into something lasting." She wouldn't say it, but I believe she knew she lost that day in the restaurant. Not because she was thrown out, but because you didn't let her take anything from you. Eliza nodded slowly. "Thank you?" Margaret hesitated, then handed her a small box. "I found this among her things. It's not real silver. Just a copy. But she tried to make it look like your pendant." Eliza opened the box. Inside, an imitation of her mother's heart-shaped locket. Not perfect. Not precise. But unmistakably an echo. She closed it and said softly. She tried to understand in her way. Or maybe tried to own what she couldn't. Margaret replied. "But either way, it's yours now." Eliza held the box for a long time. Later that night, she placed it beside the real pendant in a drawer. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder, even the ones who resist change can't avoid being shaped by it. 6 months later, Lena received her acceptance letter to the University of Michigan's School of Architecture. She screamed in the hallway, the envelope shaking in her hands, then tackled Eliza in a hug so fierce they both nearly fell to the floor. "You're going to build real things now," Eliza whispered, tears in her eyes. "I already did," Lena replied. "You." On a warm summer evening, Eliza returned to the very spot where it had begun. The old site of the Gilded Finch was now a boutique cafe, with open windows and too many ferns. But she recognized the corner, the floor tile, the echo of that long-ago confrontation. She stood outside, watching through the window. A new waitress walked past inside. She moved like Eliza once had, tired but graceful. Invisible, until something brought her into focus. Eliza didn't go in. She didn't need to. She walked on. Years later, when the Monroe Initiative expanded into a national model, with centers in Baltimore, Kansas City, and Oakland, the original pendant was donated to a community exhibit at the Harold Washington Library. It sat in a glass case, beside a photograph of Eliza and Lena on the opening day of their third center. The plaque read, "This locket belonged to Eliza Monroe, founder of the Monroe Initiative. It was given to her by her mother, and nearly sold in a moment of desperation. She didn't sell it. She built a legacy instead." And across the country, in quiet rooms where struggle still lived, young people read that story and found a little more breath to keep going. They didn't know her whole story. But they knew this: someone like them had made it. And that was enough.